All right. Let's do this. Thanks for coming. For those of you who don't know me, I am the Reverend Doctor Edmund Wallace Romanov III. Not my real name. One of those names is real. Um, my ordination and doctorate are both through the auspices of the Church of the Subgenius, Eternal Salvation, or Triple Your Money Back. Tonight we're going to be talking about the Lesser Ritual of the Pentagram, which most people seem to only know the banishing version, but there is an invoking version, and we'll get into the difference in that a little bit. There's going to be some Hebrew, there's going to be some Bible stuff, there's going to be some Kabbalah. I'm as probably allergic to that as most of you are, but we're going to learn it stock. There will be some notes and documents that I will put in the chat. Probably tomorrow when I upload this to YouTube, and I'll try to list them in the note box on YouTube too if I can figure out how to do that. So, I'm going to try to leave time for questions and answers. Alternately, we could also start talking about adaptations and variations of the Lesser Pentagram Ritual. Or we could save that for another class, next class, because that's a whole topic in and of itself. The video I posted is pretty close to the book, but it's not the actual book definition. The book definition in this case comes to us from the good old Golden Dawn. This ritual is actually not that old. It's only about 150 years old. It was invented more or less out of whole cloth by S.L. McGregor Mathers, who was one of the founders of the Golden Dawn. He supposedly got it from some ancient German cipher manuscript that somebody slipped him, but yeah, no, he wrote it. Pieces of it, most notably the Kabbalistic cross, which opens and closes it, and the actual configuration of the pentagrams comes from Eliphas Levi, writing a few decades earlier. And the sort of the invoking of the archangels portion actually comes from an Orthodox Jewish prayer that's said before bed. It's their version of "Now I lay me down to sleep," basically. The overall structure of what we're doing here is we are essentially establishing ourselves as the center of the universe. Okay? And we are creating within our space a microcosmic subjective universe in which we are God, in the same way that God is God over the macrocosm, right? That whole as above, so below thing. We are erasing that distinction. So that's why this ritual, which does exist in two forms, there's the invoking form and the banishing form. And the invoking form is done before any magical working. It's done as a temple opening. Then the banishing version is done to close the temple. As you progress higher in the grades and you get more and more complicated magic, there's also a greater pentagram ritual, a supreme ritual of the pentagram, and then there's also the lesser and greater hexagram rituals, which are astrological, whereas the pentagram rituals are all elemental. So we're dealing with the platonic elements here: air, earth, fire, water, and spirit, right? Although you will run into the hexagram in this, in one part of the ritual. So we're literally creating the universe, right? And then we were calling the archangels in to stand guard. The instruction to anyone who joins the first degree of the Golden Dawn is that you are to do this, the invoking version, every single morning when you get up, first thing in the morning, and then do the banishing version right before you go to bed, every night. Some people, for some reason, because this is why the banishing one seems to be the only one anybody knows about, read that as you do the banishing one once a day, every day, or worse yet, twice a day, every day, and then they wonder why their life goes to shit, because you're basically creating an impenetrable fortress, metaphysical fortress, that nothing can get through. That's the big secret about the banishing version of this. Either version, but the banishing version of this is an atomic face melter to anything you don't want in your space. This is the ultimate, I must protect this house ritual. This is the Fort Knox. It locks it down tight. The line in A Dark Song, which is based on the Abramelin working, phrases it really nicely, which is, it unshackles the temple from reality. Right, you're just taking that space and just lifting it right up out of normal reality. So then the basic structure, once you actually get into the ritual, is you do the Kabbalistic cross, which is, well, that way. So this is the problem. I don't know if this is going to mirror it right, so that's why I'm going to post the documents, because I think my pentagrams are going to be backwards for you guys, and I can't think backwards, and I don't know if my camera and or the screen recording software is going to mirror me or not. So yeah, I'm going to post the actual PDF. Yeah, I'm going to call it fair use, but it's coming from Israel Regardie's Golden Dawn. I think this is 4th edition. There is a 5th edition, but it's just a different intro. The documents are unchanged since essentially the 1850s. So Regardie, for those who don't know, was Crowley's secretary, and therefore was not oath bound to protect any of these secrets by Crowley. So he was able to publish them, since he was never actually in the Golden Dawn. Crowley told him, and then, right. Nearly every Golden Dawn group that exists now uses these notes, because nobody has the originals. They're gone. This is probably the best recollection of the original documents that exist, and it's well worth having. I mean, it's right up there with Crowley's Magic in Theory and Practice. I don't know if this is the first book I'd buy, but it's definitely it's a brick. It's a big black brick. It's like 800 pages. 8 by 10, so it's a phone book, and you can always use it as a doorstop. So the basic structure is Kabbalistic cross, which is basically crossing yourself but fancier. Then the formulation of the pentagrams themselves. Then the calling of the archangels to the quarters. Then you do the Kabbalistic cross again. Well, then there's a part of that that's kind of a, if we call the Kabbalistic cross 1, the pentagrams 2, the archangels 3, there's kind of a 3A and a 3B where you worry about the up and down, instead of the two-dimensional circle. And then you do the Kabbalistic cross again, and you're done. This is meant to be done in a temple space, with an altar. And as you progress around the circle, you go to the limits of the room. So you're actually walking the perimeter of the room. You're not standing in one place. That said, on my version, you stand in one place. You can do it that way. The book says you have to use your magical dagger this is not mine. I don't have one. It's the closest one I have to it. Um, which is kind of a pain in the ass because you technically haven't made your sword yet when you are doing this ritual for like the first couple of years. You don't make that until I think your second degree. I don't know. The first 4 degrees of the Golden Dawn are you make your magical weapons, right? Earth is your pentacle, air is your sword. Then you've got your cup and your wand for water and fire. But this is done. This is the important thing. It's done with the blade. It's not done with the wand. The wand is a different thing, and that is for a different purpose. That is. It seems weird. It seems like you would want to use that since the wand is the thing for projection of will and energy. However, Kabbalistically, fire and water are unbalanced. They're on the pillars on the side. The middle pillar, which is where we're working here, is associated with air, which is associated with the sword, which is associated with the east, which is why we're starting in the east. Which brings up a good point. We were talking about metaphysical east here. Metaphysical east is a bit like east in the Catholic Church, which is all Catholic churches are the altar is supposed to be facing the east. Well, the congregation is supposed to be facing east when they're looking at the altar. The altar is actually facing west, but that actually means east-ish. So generally within that entire quarter of 45 degrees of the compass. So anything from northeast to southeast. And in reality, that is pretty much whatever the church says it is. So, right. There are literally churches where it's just like the church is facing some weird direction and the bishop just said, that's east. It's east. Historically, metaphysical east, canonically, I believe, if I'm remembering this correctly, is the position that the sun rises at on the spring equinox. So exactly where it comes up at. When the sun enters Aries, right? So that first day of Aries, that's wherever the sun comes up, that is technically east. I generally pick whatever room I'm going to use, and then whichever wall is facing more or less the most east is east. So let's get into the nuts and bolts. The video I like, the video version that I posted in Inner Voice earlier, and for those of you watching this later, it's going to be the first link. That's actually the way I did it for a year, with all of the signs of the Enterer and the sign of silence, and just use your finger instead of your knife. But that's not technically the book, and we're going to start with the book because I tend to look at learning magic the same way we learn music, which is when you're first learning to play music, you learn to play the notes as they're written. Then you learn how to improvise and change and play around the notes, right? And that's ultimately the purpose of this. One of the main purposes of this ritual is to teach you your ABCs, right? And I would consider mastering this skill, not this ritual necessarily, but what it represents, which is being able to control your space magically. I would absolutely consider that a fundamental skill that until you master that and you have it down pat and you are absolutely certain that you can work it and make it work, you aren't ready to do anything else and certainly not spirit work, right? My big three are: you have to be able to meditate, you have to be able to banish, and you have to be able to make something like a basic practical enchantment stick. So like sigil magic, like make $20 appear kind of thing. You got to be able to have enough juice to get something really simple like that in concrete to stick. Although starting with money's not best, and that's a whole nother class. I actually started with, I will see a woman wearing red shoes. So we're going to do it by the book, which, you know, you're only going to be able to see this part of me, and I'm not getting up and walking around. So you'll have to visualize some of this. But this is East, so we're starting in front of our altar, which in a Golden Dawn ritual is going to be a what they call a double cube altar. So it's equal sides, right? It's a square pillar that's twice as high as it is wide and long. Facing east. And I want to make sure I'm actually reading this. So, steel dagger, right hand, facing east. Okay? Touch the forehead and say Ata. Okay? Touch the breast and say Malkuth. Right shoulder, Vegabora. Left shoulder, Vegadula. Clasp your hands as you're praying, lay olam, and then over your head with the dagger, but carefully, so you don't cut yourself. Between your hands like this, right? Up over your head, amen. Okay? So that is, to give you the whole phrase, is Ata Malkuth Vegabora Vegadula lay olam, amen, which is Hebrew for that line that appears in the Lord's Prayer in the official versions of the Catholic Church, but does not actually appear in the Gospels version of it, which is, for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. So that's where that comes from. So in the air towards the east, right? So towards the camera, you're going to draw we're going to do the banishing version. You're going to draw what's called a banishing earth pentagram. So I'm going to draw this on the screen, and this will be in the document in the notes. If you imagine a pentagram here, you have four corners and these are upright. You have four corners down here, and you have a fifth corner on top, right? And this corner down here, that's earth. Okay? And for invoking version of the pentagram, and you always draw the pentagram counterclockwise, right? So if we're doing the invoking pentagram, we start at the top and we draw down to earth, right? If we're doing banishing, which is what we're doing here, we start at the earth corner and we go away from it. Why earth? Because Kabbalistically, remember, we're talking about, so Kabbalistically, the tree of life, you have the middle pillar is air all the way down, with two exceptions, the very top and the very bottom. So Kether, which, by the way, is what we're pointing at when we say Ata, okay, has no element because that's God. It's above all of that. Elements don't exist yet. The other exception is Malkuth, which is why in a lot of versions, including one in the video, you point at your feet, right? Because that's what you're doing here, is you're essentially visualizing your body on the tree of life. Kabbalistic tree of life. That's why it's called the Kabbalistic cross. So Kether and Malkuth. Malkuth is earth. Then Gabora, right? And this one's not called Gadula. It is sometimes. I think it's actually usually called a Hokmah. Doesn't matter. Power and glory are the second So you have 3 down the sides, right? The 2 we're doing are the second one. They're the middle ones in the middle. And that's because we don't go to the supernals. Long story. And our breast here in the middle, that's Tippereth, right? And then we're projecting all of that back upwards. Other versions, like the one in the video, this is actually how I did it. You start up here and then you bring it down, right? Then up, down, right, and left. And it's just, if you're Catholic, it's just like you learned in church. Spectacles, testicles, wallet, watch. It's always right before left. So we're facing east. We did our cross, and we draw in the air. Since we're doing banishing Earth pentagram. Earth, because Earth is all of the other elements together. The greater pentagram ritual and the supreme pentagram ritual uses all of the elemental pentagrams in complement to each other. And it's very, very complicated. This is meant to be quick and easy. So if you invoke Earth or you banish Earth, you're getting all the others anyway. And also because Kabbalistically, Kether's the most important one. Malkuth is the second most important one. All of the other ones in the middle exist purely to connect those two. The Kether was the intention. Malkuth is the manifestation, the manifest world. So you draw Banishing Earth pentagram. You should visualize it in blue astrally energy type thing, and you should do it big, right? And exactly what you do here, some people disagree on. Book just says you vibrate the God name. This is actually what I like about Crowley's is completely flippin' different. We'll talk about that. I like the one in the video because you do the sign of the Enterer. So left foot forward, you project it out. When I'm actually doing them, I just kind of stab in the middle, which I think is actually a Wiccan thing. But you say the first God name, which is the Tetragrammaton. Now, the book spells it out because in those days nobody knew how to pronounce the Tetragrammaton. Yod He Vav He, right? Nowadays we actually know how that was pronounced. It's Yahweh, not Jehovah. We knew it wasn't Jehovah by then, but we didn't know what it was. Jehovah is this weird Frankenstein that showed up in the English language because Hebrew Bibles at the time, when vowel markings first became a thing, to keep people from accidentally pronouncing the name, because that's the one name of God you're never supposed to say. You're never supposed to think it. Get it out of your head. When they first did vowel markings to keep people from accidentally even pronouncing it in their head, they used the regular word letters, Yod He Vav He, but they put the vowels in from one of the other God names we're going to see, which is the next one, which is Adonai, which is Lord. Okay. Yahweh is a really weird, hacked up version. Nobody's really sure where it comes from. They think it might be a really bizarre tense of inflection of another God name we're going to see. It's the third one, which is a Heye, which is the Hebrew word for I am. Right? So a version of the word for to be. Essentially, actually, I'm going to take these off and get a lot of glare. So, Yahweh. Now, you leave your arm out at this point, okay? And remember, after you did your Kabbalistic cross, when you draw this thing, you're standing at the perimeter of whatever your working circle is. I don't. I do it where I'm standing and then project the thing outward, because you're supposed to project it out to the limits of the universe anyway. You do it, and if you're standing in one place, you just turn, and you always go clockwise here. So we're starting in the east, we're going to turn to the south. Okay, so we're going to turn the whole camera here, and now I'm facing south. If you're walking around the room, you're supposed to actually, without taking this thing out of your right hand, march around the perimeter to the southern quarter, right? You do the pentagram again, and you say Adonai. Vibrate, which is, you're supposed to take a whole exhalation, and in some versions of this, you're actually supposed to pick different musical notes, but, you know, with your best Orson Welles from your diaphragm voice, you know, Adonai, and you just keep it going. You should feel it. One of the tricks I use there is if you actually start humming, for all of us, there's kind of, it's different depending on how your body's laid out. There's a note that when you start humming it, your lips will start tingling, like, because you're hitting the resonant frequency of, like, your skull and shit. That's the tone to use. Like, you want to feel it. It should come up from your toes. So in the south, we're doing Adonai. This is the element. East is the element of air. South is the element of fire, right? Which makes sense. If you're in Europe, if you're in the United States, East and West, when we get to West, it doesn't make much sense. I promise you this. But if you're in the northern hemisphere, south is where it's warm, north is where it's cold. East is where the sun comes up, west is where the sun comes down. West is water, which again makes sense if you're in Europe. Western Europe, at least. Say England, where the guys who wrote this were at, you know. In the United States, in other parts of the world, maybe west is water, as the Great Ocean doesn't make much sense, but hey, whatever. We're supposed to be standing in Jerusalem anyway, and west is water, right? So, south is fire, Adonai. Adonai is Lord. It's a generic Hebrew word for Lord, although it generally only gets used to describe God in the Old Testament. There is another word for Lord, which is Baal. So Baal, he's the bad Lord, right? So when you see in your Old Testament, they talk about Baal Hadad, Baal this, Baal that. Those are Baal is a title. It's not a singular deity. And when we use it as a singular spirit, we're usually referring to Baal Hadad, which was basically Phoenician Zeus. So Adonai tends to only get applied to their god. Baal gets applied to... Adonai gets applied to our god. Baal gets applied to their god, because we don't like the Phoenicians. So Adonai, you turn the whole thing around now to the west, right? And you do it again. And this is water. Do it again. Iheye. So Iheye comes to us from the book of Exodus. So Moses is talking to the burning bush, right? And God's telling him to go, set his people free. And Moses asks him 3 times, basically, what's your name? And God gives him 3 different answers. This is one of them, which is Iheye Asher Iheye, which is terrible Hebrew pronunciation, but nobody really knows how Hebrew was pronounced anyway, so... Because again, no vowel markings until the Middle Ages. Iheye means I am. But it's a straightforward I am. So Iheye Asher Iheye means I am that I am. We circle around again to the north, right? This is the quarter of Earth, which is cold because it's death. Earth is also death. It's winter, right? We'll get into that. There's layers of symbolism here. So in the north, you do your pentagram, and you do Agalah, which is actually a Hebrew word, but nobody cares what that means. It's an acronym. It's a Kabbalistic acronym, and I can never remember this, which is why I have to look it up in my notes right now, which is Ata Gibor Leolam Adonai. Thou, O Lord, art mighty forever. And it used to be written, the acronym in Hebrew, Agala, used to be written on little talismans for protection. So you've come all the way around the circle, 3/4 of the way around the circle. This is important. When you do the last one, you don't drop the knife. You don't drop the knife at any point in this, right? Because you're tracing a circle that is the limit of your working space. You have to bring it back around to the east, complete the circle, then you can drop it. And by drop it, I mean bring it back to here. Or if you're just like in church, you're just doing your finger. You don't just bebop around when you're an altar boy. You do this. And you never, ever, ever, ever in traditional Golden Dawn style magic walk counterclockwise around anything. So you're at the east, standing in front of your altar now. You continue counterclockwise around and then circle back around to the part of your altar. Which then leads us then to the invocation of the Archangels portion, which is you can make yourself cross like it does the other way. I tended to do it this way. Stand on one foot, however you want to stand, right? And in front of you, you're supposed to visualize the Archangel Raphael, who generally wears yellow because that's the color of air. Air represents intellect, mind. And you say, before me, Raphael. At the south quarter, which is on your right side, you visualize Archangel Michael, who wears red, because that's the color of fire. At my right hand, Michael. Behind you is the Archangel Gabriel in blue, because that's the color of water. Behind me, Gabriel. And then back over here to Earth, angel wearing black, which is Uriel, the angel of death. My left hand, Uriel. Some versions of this, and let me check the book to make sure, because I think I screwed that up according to the book. Yeah, you actually do front, back, right, left in the book version. That never made sense to me, so I just went around the circle the same way I did the pentagrams. But you're supposed to say, before me, Raphael. Behind me, Gabriel. At my right hand, Michael. At my left hand, Uriel. For about me, flame the pentagrams. And some versions have you looking up at this. You're supposed to visualize a sphere, a column of light, sort of projecting up and down from the cylinder you just described, with the non-unicursal hexagram. So that's 2 triangles, one red, one blue. Right? So like the Star of David, but 2 different colors. Over your head in the column. Which is why you say, for about me blaze the pentagrams, and behind me shines the 6-rayed star. Which they have behind. It's, yeah. Then, at this point, if you're into doing the middle pillar ritual, this is when you do the middle pillar ritual. Right? Then you do, but in just the pentagram ritual, we do Kabbalistic cross again. So Ata, Makuth, Vegabora, Vegadula, Leolam, Amen. You're done. That's it. You're banished. Okay? Temple's closed. Some versions of this, when you are visualizing the archangels, if you are invoking, you visualize them facing you, right? Because you're calling them in to assist you. If you are banishing, you imagine them facing out because you're posting them there as guards. I generally find people who say that because this is classic Golden Dawn stuff. So there's a lot of stuff in this ritual that will make absolutely no sense in their system until you get to the very last thing you learn in their system, which is their version of Enochian magic. And then you're like, aha, that's why we do it this way. Uses, as I've said, opening and closing. Invoking and banishing. So if you want to call energies in, right, you can invoke. You want to banish stuff. You do the banishing version. The banishing version by itself is a fantastic way to lock down your space, no matter what's going on, to the extent that I do inverted pentagrams. If I got a spook or somebody attacking me through some vector, I literally just, do my thing, just wherever it is, and get the fuck out, kind of thing. The key though is magic doesn't work like magic. It's not about the magic and the gestures and everything else. This whole thing is telling a story, and that story is you are God. You are God. And in this circle, you are God. You control everything that happens in here. And there is nothing, no spirit, no demon, no angel, not God himself can come in this circle and fuck with you. That's the key. You can't think that. You can't believe that. You have to know that down in your bones. That's why we say gnosis. We'll talk about variations in a bit. Layers of symbolism. We've got the elements, right? We've got the 4 cardinal directions, also good. We've got the position of the sun throughout the day, right? We've got the parts of the day. So we have sunrise, and again, northern hemisphere. As it goes through the sky, it passes through the sky to the south of us, right? And then sets in the west, and then we have night. So we're the journey of Osiris, although not Crowley and the Golden Dawn both like to talk about this being the journey of Osiris. This makes no sense if you're in the tropics, and certainly not the southern hemisphere, because it doesn't work that way. Because the sun actually goes the sun goes either side of you depending on what time of year it is in the tropics. So you also have the seasons. That's why we start in the east, and why it's the spring equinox and the first day of Aries, right? So you have spring, which is the beginning of the Roman year, the beginning of most pagan years. So you have spring, summer, fall, winter. So you go around the circle. You also have the 8 Sabbats, right? So you have March 21st, then halfway in between. So you have the spring equinox in front of you, halfway in between. I don't know the names of these. You have the halfway one, right? Then you have summer. So you have the 8 traditional Sabbats. So you have your equinoxes in front of you and behind you. Solstice, equinox in front and behind you. Solstices on your sides, right? And then your mid-seasonals in the corners. So the whole thing's a clock, right? It's everything that can be symbolized by a circle, which is a lot, is in this circle. Similarly, everything that can be visualized, can be symbolized by a point, is you in the circle, right? The thing creating it. So think of it like the Big Bang. You're the Big Bang. It's space-time. Everything being pushed out from you. This would be a good place to stop for a round of questions. If if anybody has any before we start talking about some of the main variations on this. Anybody?
I think I'm good right now.
Okay.
Good here.
I'm moving fast. I know I am. So variations here. The big one is, so not the big one. The first one is Crowley's Liber XXV Star Ruby, which I will include a link to that in the notes. That's public domain now, which is a good one to look at for... You can really go nuts with this thing. So Crowley keeps the basic structure, but it is completely different. It's all in Greek. It's referring to him and Babylon, and you don't even draw the pentagrams. You visualize them in front of on your forehead, and you like project them out. And you do the sign of Horus, and do all kinds of crazy stuff with it, right? So that's a really good example of crazy go nuts time with it. Because this thing is, again, the important part is the story that you are telling and the layers of symbolism that you are building. And how you get there doesn't matter, right? It's whatever. So if you take the Judeo-Christian skin off of this, you can then layer whatever skin you want to on top of it. After Crowley, the biggest one was probably Wicca. So Wicca has their own version of this that they start everything with. Although they only have this. They don't have anything else on either parts of it. And they have theirs pretty stripped down, as I understand it. And, Wicca's Wicca, so there's a million different traditions now. But not surprisingly, Gardnerian Wicca uses is going to look really familiar to you. If this Golden Dawn version is going to look really familiar to anyone who knows Gardnerian Wicca. And there's a reason for that. Their important innovation, though, is that, as I understand it, they don't have an invoking and a banishing version of it, and neither do I, right? They just have, this is the thing we do to open and close things, and they don't do it any differently. And I only do it to open. I don't do it to close, right? So the important part is, so the thing I'm breaking there is I'm breaking the association between invoking and banishing. Pentagrams, I just draw the thing, right? And I'm doing them in inverted. Same thing is, I don't worry about the elemental corners so much. So that's another way you can modify this. You can choose to disregard certain portions of the symbolism. As long as you keep the core of it, which is the circle and the point. You are the point. The universe is the circle. You are God. You are creating your space, and you are controlling your space, and you are at cause over everything that occurs within this space. And nobody can mess with you in here. When magicians talk about why it's so dangerous to try to directly monkey with somebody else's will, as in a love spell, targeted love spell, this is why. Because when you do that, you are now the interloping demon in somebody else's circle. And you are one moment of gnosis away from them figuring out that they're God and melting your face. And not to get too conspiratorial, actually to get very conspiratorial. My problem with most conspiracy theorists is they think too small, right? The conspiracy isn't something that's existed for like the last 50 or 60 years. It goes back to like Egypt. It's old, right? And here's the real secret. They're right in here. It's built right in your fucking DNA, man. Okay? Is everything in literally the entire history of mankind has been designed and implemented to keep anyone from figuring that out. That's why doing this, some version of this, every day for a year is a really good idea to hammer that particular lesson into your skull, where it can do the most good. And I literally did that, the stock one, well, the one in the video, every day for a year. Then I did, which is the next major variation, which is the Gnostic Pentagram Ritual, which comes to us from early Chaos magic. It's mostly Peter Carroll, but it's a bunch of other guys too, because it Chaos, or especially early British Chaos magic, is to magic what punk is to rock. So everybody was just kind of riffing on everybody else and doing it themselves. That one has no Kabbalistic cross. They don't care how you draw the pentagram, or really what direction you start in. And all the god names are the same, which is Iao, the Gnostic god name, Yao, right? Which I did all the vowels. And then my version of the Kabbalistic cross started with, for the Gnostic, started with this sign over your head to pull the light down. Then, right, the alchemical sign of air, sort of in front of your head, which is where you do your thinking. Fire, sort of in front of your chest, which is your heart, which is where you do your feeling. So that's about. This in front of in your guts, which there's reasons for that. And then earth in sort of front of your junk, which again, not quite. It's like 5 chakras. Yeah, close enough. One version I really like is, I think this comes from Alan Chapman. He actually drew the pentagrams using a swirl, like arcs pattern, which if you've ever seen some editions of Call of Cthulhu, it's how they draw the pentagram in the Elder sign, right? So you draw them with arc segments, and you're supposed to imagine them sort of twisting while you do it. Literally the first, last, and only time I did this thing, I had to like sit down. I almost fucking passed out because it was just like, it's really weird. Then when you get to the modern era, you get all kinds of fun versions of this. Everybody's riffing on this. You've got neo-pagans layering their versions over it with whatever pantheon you want to do. You've got Norse pagan versions of this that completely fuck with the elemental associations and everything. Just crazy go nuts time. Of course, you have all the fun stuff on the left-hand path and the spooky demon Satan-y guys. You know, LeVay had his kind of version of it with his associations, and everybody seems to have their own. My personal favorite is Asenath Mason and Bill Duvendak in the Temple of Ascending Flame. They literally have a different version of this for practically every ritual they do. It's just completely, it's like the same basic structure, but whose names get called as you're going around the circle, completely different. My version is a riff on Asenath Mason's for invoking Lilith. So what I do is, and again, this is thinking Kabbalistically, specifically Qliphottically. So there's this big thing. It's in traditional witchcraft. It is definitely a thing in the Qliphothic working, which is backwards thinking, right? So we do things like all of the visualizations you normally do when you're doing your breathing. We do them backwards, to the extent that when you're walking around, right, when you step forward with your right foot, you are supposed to project the left foot of your astral body forward. So you're working on opposite sides of your body. The whole idea of it is that you are attempting to deliberately reverse the normal energy flows, right, in an attempt to unplug from what Kenneth Grant calls Universe A, the causal universe, which is all about the God out there, the Matrix. You are attempting to unplug from that and go to the other side, which is the main name of the tree of the Qliphoth, Sitra Ara, which is Hebrew for the other side, because they're both sides of the same tree. And that tree is the tree of knowledge, not the tree of life. So the tree of life is just the Sephiroth. The tree of knowledge is both sides, unified, because there were two trees in Eden. And the bad tree was knowledge, and the good tree was life. And when we ate from the tree of knowledge, everybody got kicked out. And now you can't eat of the fruit of the tree of life, which is why in the Golden Dawn, you aren't allowed or able to go above the abyss to the top three Sephiroth. Crowley said he did, but Crowley said a lot of things. He kind of went a little nuts after he attempted it. Specifically, trying to cross the abyss to get to the supernals was what Crowley and Neuberg were doing, running around doing sex magic in the desert under the hot sun. That's exactly what they were trying to do. And depending on who you ask, some people say that's when everything went right for Crowley. A lot of other people, that's when everything went wrong for Crowley. Crowley himself was ambiguous on the matter. He wasn't really sure. So, that in mind, my version starts in the north, not the east. Okay? We do inverted pentagrams and always moving counterclockwise in terms of our corners. So, corner here, going counterclockwise. Our next corner is here, counterclockwise, here, 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 and then back to beginning. Proceeding counterclockwise around the circle, back to the north. The names being used are the 4 consorts of Lucifer. So, Samael, same diff. Lilith in the north. That's why we start in the north, because our altar faces north. She's in the north. That's her quarter, because she's associated with Malkuth, with Earth. And so Lilith, and then in the west for water we have Agrat. South is her mother Mahalath. East is her sister Nama, Princess of Screeching. And we come around here. Of course, placing then myself in the place of Lucifer in the center. So it's the same message, it's just spookier and heavy metal. So yeah, variations can go nuts with this thing. You can do it however you want. Really, experiment with it. I do recommend, so practicalities. I do recommend one. I don't use the knife. To me, magical weapons are working tools, and that's like one of the things that Golden Dawn tells you are never, ever, 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 ever supposed to do, which is use your magical weapons for anything else. So my whole point is, they're working tools. That's what they were invented for, right? So the symbolism is Earth is the pentacle, which is a plate. It is a working surface. It is a cutting board, right? The thing we do the cutting with is the knife, right? So we're cutting up meat or whatever, right? And in the same way that the mind separates truth from falsehood, which is not about whether things are actually true or false, more as which ones we want to consider true or false for this moment in time, right? The cup is any vessel for holding liquids, right? And the wand doesn't make a lot of sense until you've sat around a campfire a bunch of times and you have a poking stick for poking at the fire and stirring it around and keeping it going. So yeah, that's what they started as, is working tools. And the idea of having, especially the Golden Dawn, which is you have this blade that you costs a fuck ton of money that you are supposed to forge yourself, and nobody did, so they had somebody else do it for them. Yeah, no, that's insane. Understand when you do your deep dive, if you do your deep dive into the Golden Dawn, understand that the reason the Golden Dawn existed, really, the main reason the Golden Dawn existed and became popular, is because there were English Freemasons for whom English Freemasonry wasn't fancy enough and required enough money. Like, they wanted really, like, man, I love standing around in a lodge in fancy costumes and doing all this crazy cool stuff, but I want more of that. And so they just did a lot more of that. That's the Golden Dawn. And yeah, the grade rituals are the most amazing things you will ever read, because there's like this whole cavalcade of characters and lodge officers walking around and making pronouncements, and yeah, it's every Masonic ritual you've ever seen turned up to 11. Like, I've literally, like, that's how I found out about the Golden Dawn. Was a friend of mine, his dad was a Freemason and loved Freemasonry, big Mason, 33rd degree Scottish Rite, ninth degree York Rite. Was in the Shriners back when you still had to be 32nd degree to do it, all that stuff. And he sort of turned me on to the Golden Dawn, because it was just like that's some heavy ritual. Like, mass is like high Catholic mass is nothing compared to this thing. This is by guys with really bitchin' sideburns who wanted to stand around and look cool. Yeah, play with it, go nuts. I definitely recommend finding one. Start simple. So either buy the book, something like the Gnostic Pentagram Ritual. It's a little more freeform, maybe even a little simpler. And stick with that until it kind of becomes second nature, and then start riffing on it a little bit. Yeah, that was fast. So, questions? Let's see what my file size is like. I think I'm good. Okay.
I think the only thing I would compute that is so draw them counterclockwise and you lock counterclockwise, or which direction do you lock and go with the way to never lock?
So in stock, easiest way to remember it is right hand path, left hand path. Okay? So if you're facing north, to your right hand is the east. That's where you start. To the east, and then you always progress to the right around the circle. Okay? In left hand path, you start in the north, right? And then you do it exactly backwards. You start in the north and you go counterclockwise, always counterclockwise in left hand path, because you're doing it backwards. Yeah, right hand path is very right hand path about that. Left hand path, most of us don't really care, but because our usage of the term tends to refer more to the tantric usage of the term, which is annoying that we only got 2 of them. There's like 5 different paths in Tantra, and we only got 2 of them. And one of them we don't really have, because there is no real right-hand path in Tantra. There's only a left-hand path, Vamakara, which actually means the path of feminine attainment. Although somebody told me, and I kind of want to believe it because it makes so much sense, is that the reason that right-hand path and left-hand path are called right hand and left hand, is because if you stand pretty much anywhere in India and face east, the orthodox gurus and teachers are all in the south, which is to your right, and the tantric and heterodox teachers are all to the north, which is on your left. Right? So that's what that kind of comes from. And it is true is that when you go to India, tradition, what you think of when you think of Hinduism is entirely a product of southern India, what we would call India today, like what was not, the full extent of India. Whereas what we would consider Tantra is almost entirely a product of northern India, Tibet, Nepal, kind of the same places Buddhism came from, which is why in Tibetan Buddhism, you kind of have a mishmash of Tantra and Buddhism together, to the extent that to a lot of Buddhists, more mainstream Buddhists outside of Tibet, Tibetan Buddhism, they're considered basically the Satanists of Buddhism. Like they're the sorcerers and the weird guys that you don't go to. You don't talk about them. And what's funny is you go to them, like you go to the Dalai Lama, who is only the head of one of the sects of Tibetan Buddhism. He's the head of the big one, the one that ended up controlling the state. They have their own version of those guys, which, those guys over there, you don't go to them because they're the sorcerers. And then you go to them guys and they're like, they're not that bad. You want the real scary shit, you go to Thailand. You go to Thailand and Cambodia. Because I have read some shit about traditional magic in Thailand and Cambodia, and it is fucking scary. Like the shit they sell to tourists is talismans made out of mummified aborted fetuses. Like that's where this starts, and it goes downhill from there. Yeah. So that's how you remember which way you're going. So right hand path is solar, right? Solar. So you start facing the sun and always go to the right. Left hand path is more lunar, which so you face north because that's associated with night. You go around day night, right left, that whole thing. Anything else? Anybody? I know I covered a lot of information really fast. I'm going to try to pace myself for the next one.
Well, I enjoyed that. Are we able to rewatch this later?
Yeah, I'll probably upload this tomorrow. I'm recording this using QuickTime, since I'm on a Mac, and the recording quality tends to be pretty high, and so it takes a while to transcode it for YouTube. So, and there's also a possibility that this would be the first video, and it's going to be a private video that I post to my own YouTube. So I may run into file size and time limits. So I may have to transfer this over to DH to get him to upload it to his channel. And I want to put together the notes, and I want to lift out the section from the PDF of Golden Dawn that covers this. And I may, for shits and giggles, throw at least a couple of links for like the Greater and the Supreme and the Hexagram Rituals. There used to be a YouTube channel that was fantastic by this guy called Billy Brujo, who took it all down because he got a legit job as a 3D animator, and like they didn't want that shit up there for whatever reason. But so he used to use like Maya to render these like in 3D in the cube of space, so you could spin it around and see the space that you're creating, right, with all of them. But to give you the basic version, so greater basically you're doing more, and it's more elaborate, and you're using the actual elemental pentagrams, right? And then Supreme, I don't know that I understand Supreme. Supreme is really weird. Like I'm not sure what they're hammering at with that one. But they never really taught that one. It was just kind of like, once you made Adept, they would just kind of hand you the rest of the stuff and say, figure it out. So it's kind of in that bin with like Enochian and stuff like that, where it's like they did never really finished it, never really figured out what it was for. The hexagram, so that's 6 points, right? Which, if you ever seen Thelema, their fancy little two triangle thing, that's called the unicursal hexagram, and the whole reason Crowley came up with that is so you could draw it in the air like you do a pentagram. You don't have to draw two separate triangles, kind of thing. That one uses each point of the star, 6-pointed star, references one of the astrological bodies other than the sun. So the sun is the center, right? You are the sun. So it's for astrological magic. 6 points represent the all the other planets, including the moon, and when you do those, you aren't doing, if you're doing them right, so like in the greater hexagram ritual, you're actually doing them pointed at, so you're doing them at night, and you're pointing as you do each one of the 6, the invoking one or the banishing one, you're actually pointing at it in the sky, wherever it is in the sky when you're doing it. But again, understand these nest, right? So before you would ever do a hexagram ritual in the Golden Dawn or Crowley stuff, you would do a pentagram ritual first. And you do lesser, lesser, greater, greater. So if you're doing a lesser hexagram ritual, you do a lesser pentagram ritual, greater hexagram ritual, greater pentagram ritual. And then you have to undo those. And they get really long after a while. I mean, it's just a lot. Because again, you're so astrologically, it's a little weird because it doesn't seem like we are, but we are. So the reason especially when you see it in that video, there's a whole lot of emphasis on, and especially Crowley's version, so Liber XXV Star Ruby, I highly recommend people looking that one up, is on projecting the pentagrams out when you formulate them, is because you are establishing the limits of the universe. So in astrological terms, that is considered the zodiac, so the realm of the fixed stars, right? You're establishing the zodiac as you're going around. And note also that, again, the 4 signs we are in astrologically, so if you're doing this, imagining due east as Aries, as you go around the circle, as I understand it, and astrology is not my thing, but as I understand it, those 4 signs are the cardinal signs of those elements. So 12 signs of the zodiac. Each one of those signs is associated with one of the 4 elements that we're dealing with here, in one of 3 modes. And so one of those modes is cardinal, meaning it's sort of the pure essence of that thing. So it's except Aries is fire, I thought. I don't know. The point is, it's not that when I say they nest, what I mean is when you're doing the pentagram ritual, you're establishing the outer limits of the universe, and then when you do the hexagram ritual, you're basically drawing the solar system in which you're operating. So that's for a lot of internal alchemy type stuff. And in the Golden Dawn system, a lot of these associations, again, the other reason they start you on this and they keep hammering it on you in your entire lower order curriculum, is because when you get to the Rosicrucian stuff, in the Adept stuff, this stuff has to be second nature, because it's there's so many layers of all of those associations everywhere in Rosicrucianism, in alchemy, in in astrology, in tarot, in Enochian, everything. So like this is the Mathers had his flaws, right? This was not one of them. Like that thing alone, this one ritual, if he did nothing else, earned him a position head and shoulders above almost anybody else, especially in terms of doing practical magic. He took an awful lot of stuff and he boiled it down to the brass tacks and made it simple enough for people to understand. Crowley failed miserably at trying to do that. Nobody did anything even remotely like that for another 100 years until Chaos Magic came along, where completely remixed magic. There's certainly better scholars of magic, better academics of magic, however you want to study magic academically. The armchair occultist thing. There were lots of guys that were better than that. There was nobody better at straightforward ritual than Mathers. His stuff was tight. To the point where the reason a lot of people don't like it is because it's too simple. It's too straightforward. And it's too Jewish. And it's too Christian. It gets really Christian in the Rosicrucian part. It's kind of in the name. So yeah. Any thoughts on what anybody wants to do next week?
I liked all the suggestions you put in the
Ac-
thing. Definitely don't know much about the Golden Dawn, so I enjoy learning about it for sure.
Actually, it wouldn't be next week. It'd be 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Yeah. Golden Dawn's worth talking about. Like I think like this one may be a little drier and less practical than this, but easier to do in this format is really talk about, say, like modern occultism, starting with the Golden Dawn, which is really when it starts, up through sort of where we're at today, because everything there is before the Golden Dawn and there is after the Golden Dawn, and yeah, it drew on a lot of threads, and especially a lot with this guy, right? So Uncle Al would be nothing without the Golden Dawn. Everything Uncle Al did was a remix of the Golden Dawn. A brilliant remix, because he was the guy who figured out how to jailbreak it. So take it out of the context it was in and sort of showed us the path for how to recontextualize it in any number of ways. He took the classical music of the Golden Dawn and turned it into jazz. It's probably the right way to understand it. And then Chaos Magic turned it into punk rock. But that's probably the three main points we'll hit, is Golden Dawn, Crowley, Chaos Magic, in that order.
Cool.
All right.
Cool.
Unless anybody's got anything else, I'm going to call it a night. Going once, going twice. Sold American.